Hey, what's up guys? This is Andrew again from 3DDC, and this is going to be part 2 to making an enclosure for the Raspberry Pi using Onshape. This enclosure is of course going to be 3D printed, and in the first part of this video we designed two halves that, one, the Raspberry Pi snaps in place with those standoffs, and also those pegs will slide into some receptacles on the top to hold the two halves together. So in this video, I'm going to get this Pi 2, this model of the Pi 2 we found in the last video, and I'm going to use it to make cutouts. So you need cutouts so you can plug things in. So a Raspberry Pi is a computer, and you have to plug things into a computer. You need access to ports. So you need access to your Ethernet port, your USB ports, of course your audio. We might add one for the camera on the top, and then the HDMI to connect the screen, and micro USB for power. You'll also need access to the SD card slot in order to load SD cards, because that's the Raspberry Pi's form of memory. And we also might add one for the GPIO. So that's what the cutouts are for. But before we do that, I realized after I made the first video that I made a mistake. I forgot to add fillets here, so I'm going to do that now. But it's really not going to work out, and I'll show you why I should have done it in the beginning, before I shelled them out. But there's a way to fix it, and I'll show you how to do that. So I press Shift plus F to fillet these. And what a fillet does is it just gives it that nice curve. It gets rid of those sharp corners, and it just makes it look a whole lot better. At least using it in this case, it just makes it look a whole lot better. So 5mm, that looks pretty good. So I'm gonna press OK there. But look what happens when we'll hide the top. Look at the shell. See, the shell doesn't go with the fillet, so you're not gonna have uniform wall thickness. And you know, of course, you want uniform wall thickness. So I could go in here and add fillets to here and here, but that's kind of a tedious process. I really don't want to do that. It would be a whole lot better if I'd have done this before I shelled it. So do I have to go back and delete everything I did? Well, no. You can just take this and move it to right before the shell. Both shells. And after it updates, you'll see you now have uniform wall thickness because the shell goes along with the fillet. So that just goes to show you it's okay to make mistakes in Onshape, and you don't have to go back and redo a whole bunch of stuff. You can just move something along this timeline type deal here, and it's really great, because you also can keep track of yourself there too. If you made a mistake, you can go in there and delete that mistake, and it's just really great. So anyway, now I'm going to start making those cutouts. So I'm going to go ahead and show the Pi 2. So right now I just have the Pi 2 and the bottom part of the enclosure showing. So in order to make the cutouts though, I need the Pi 2 to be where it's supposed to be in the enclosure. So basically these holes need to go into this peg, or these pegs, and they need to be flush with this standoff right here. So if I look at the model of the Raspberry Pi I imported in, well, the bottom left corner of it is of course on the origin. So that kind of helps me out, because this enclosure I designed, I made it out of a lot of center rectangles, and I centered those rectangles around the origin. That means if I move this over by half of its length on the x-axis, or the y-axis, I'm sorry, if I move it down by half its length on the y-axis and move it over to the left by half its length on the x-axis, well, then it will be centered. That would make it centered with the origin, just like this one was, meaning it would line up. And then of course I'll have to move it down. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go up here to transform. I'm going to select the Pi 2, and where it says translate by line, I'm going to press translate by XYZ. This lets you type values in, or use these little handles over here, which can come in handy. But right now I know what I'm doing. So remember this drawing? Well, I'm going to pull it up, and you know the Raspberry Pi is 56 on the y-axis. So 56 divided by 2 is going to be 28. So I'm going to move it down minus 28 millimeters. Okay, and look there. Now the Y is split by this front plane, meaning it's centered. So in order to make it completely centered around the origin, I have to have the X, I have to do the same thing to the X-axis. So the X-axis was 85. 85 divided by 2 is 42.5, so I'm typing negative 42.5. And if you give it a minute to update, you can see now all the holes are in the standoffs, so they are both centered around the origin, meaning they both line up. However, you still see it's not all the way flush with the standoffs. So I need to move it down, and how I can figure that out is, well, I gave it 1.6 millimeter walls, and then I gave it 2 millimeter standoffs. So 2 plus 1.6 is going to be 3.6, of course. The whole thing is 11.5. 11.5 minus 3.6 is 7.9. So I'm going to move it down by typing in minus 7.9 millimeters. And there you can see it's now flush with the standoffs, and it's all lined up. So this is exactly where it's going to be when we have it in, when we actually print out the enclosure. This is exactly where the Raspberry Pi is going to be at. So I'm going to press OK. Okay, so now we can start making these cutouts. So I'm going to do it all with sketches. So I'm going to make a plane over here, and the plane is just something you can sketch on. Now it's automatically going to offset that plane by 150 millimeters. Just type in 0 there, because you don't want to offset it at all. Press OK. And go over here to where your plane is. And we're going to make a sketch on plane 1. And I'm going to go ahead and hide the bottom. And now what I want to do is, of course, create sketches of these ports. So how do I do that? Well, I could just go in here and create lines to create lines that look like this and everything, but that's really tedious. Well, I can just press U to project sketches, and I can select these edges, and it will sketch it for me, which comes in really handy. So all I have to do is select all the edges of a sketch, or all the edges of a solid that I want to create a sketch from, and it'll create sketches that I can then extrude. But first I'm going to offset them to give them a little bit of clearance, because of course the connectors are bigger than the ports, so I'm going to want to give them clearance to go through the entire enclosure. So I just want to make sure I have everything selected, so I'm going to hide the Pi 2. Okay, and I have complete sketches, so I got everything selected correct. Now I'm going to press O, okay, of course, for offset, and I'm going to select all the edges. All the lines, rather, that I just created. And 1.5 millimeters is probably enough clearance. So I'm going to type in 1.5. Okay, cool. Now we have that. So I'm still on offset. I'm going to select the edges of this USB port. And this is something to note. Sometimes it'll start offsetting inside. You don't really want it to do that, so you can just bring it out. Okay, and then just type in 1.5. Press enter again, and there it is. I'm going to do the same thing for this USB port. And again, all this is doing is just creating some clearance room. So it gives yourself a little bit of leeway to do some, to of course fit your connectors inside there. And okay, so I messed up a little bit there, but that's okay. I'm just going to reselect these edges. Okay, so I'm back on O, and I'm going to select all the edges, of course. Okay, and I'll type in enter, and type in 1.5, press enter again. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to press OK for that sketch, and I'm going to go ahead and show the bottom, and I'm going to select all the faces of these sketches. I'm going to press Shift plus E to extrude. Okay, and I want to make sure to extrude this way. And I'm going to click on remove. Okay, but I want to go ahead and show the top also. And down here, this is called your merge scope. And right now, just the bottom is selected, so it's not going to subtract from the top. Well, I want it to. So I'm going to go over here to the merge scope and select the top. And now it's going to cut out from both the top and the bottom. So I can press OK. Alright, cool. So now we have our cutouts. And you can see inside there now that it's lined up. The top and bottom are lined up. And if we showed the Pi 2, you'd see that you have your ports and you have cutouts and you have enough clearance to plug in your connectors. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the top again. And now I'm going to make cutouts for audio and HDMI and micro USB. So I'm going to again create a plane over here. Of course, offset it by 0 millimeters. And go over there to it. You can use this cube up in the corner to help yourself get oriented. And press OK there. Okay, now what I can do is hide the bottom, create a sketch on plane 2. And I'm again just going to project elements from these solids. So I'm going to select all these edges. I press U for project, and I'm just going to select all the edges. And I'm going to do the same process. I'm just going to offset them. With the HDMI port, I think I'm going to offset it a little bit more than the other ones, because HDMI cords or HDMI connectors, they're really bulky. So I'm going to have to offset that a little bit more. And also on this audio jack, see, it's a circle, but it's more like a whole lot of lines put together. So I wish you could just select an entire circle, but unfortunately you just have to go through and select all these lines. And if you found a different model, you may not have to do that, but that's what you have to do for this one. So I'm just going to go through and select all these lines. Okay, so now I'm going to hide the Pi 2 to make sure I have complete sketches. Okay, and now I'm going to press O again to offset these. So I'm going to select this one, just select all the lines. Okay, and I'm going to offset it by 1.5. Okay, remember when I talked about the HDMI plug is normally really big, so I'm going to go ahead and offset this one by 2.5, just to give myself a lot of room. In fact, I think I may just do 2. And if it doesn't work, of course, that's why 3D printing is awesome, because I can just go change that if I print it out and it's not right. Okay, so now I'm going to offset this one, and unfortunately, again, you have to select every single edge. I wish I had one of those speed up deals in my software. I don't know, I might be able to. But I'm just going to bring it out and offset it by 1.5. Okay, so now we have our sketches. We're going to call it OK. And again, I'm just going to show the bottom. Really, we don't have to. So I'm just going to select all the faces of the sketches to be extruded. And I'm going to press Shift E to extrude. And I'm going to go ahead and show the bottom and show the top. And I want to shoot them out this way. And I'm going to press remove. And of course on the merge scope down here that I was talking about earlier, I want to select the bottom and the top. So that'll cut out from both the bottom and the top. So I'm going to press OK. So now I show the Pi 2, and you can see you have a lot of room to plug in your micro USB connections, your headphones, and your HDMI. So the last thing I'm going to do is one for the camera. So I'm actually going to hide the bottom this time. And I'm going to hide the Pi 2 also. And I'm going to create a plane right here on the face of this shell. And of course I'm going to offset it by 0 millimeters. I don't want it to be offset at all. Okay, call it OK. And come around here to the top. hide the bottom, and we're going to show the Pi 2. Okay, and now I'm going to create a sketch on this plane. It's plane 3. Press U to project, and I'm just going to select all of this. And with this one, I really actually don't need an offset. In fact, I may offset it in a little bit because the camera connector is just a ribbon cable that's actually thinner than the connector itself. So I should be able to be fine with this without offsetting it. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the Pi, make sure I have a complete selection, and I'm just going to leave it like that. So I'm going to show the top now, and of course call it good for that sketch. I'm just going to hide the top. I'm going to select that, Shift E, show the top, come out this way with it, remove, the merge scope is going to be of course the top, and boom, that's good. Okay, now the final thing I have to do is make a cutout so you can get to the SD card, because of course the SD card is the Raspberry Pi's only source of memory, so the entire operating system is held on the SD card. You're definitely going to want to change it out a lot. That's just what's great about the Raspberry Pi, is you can change operating systems really easily just by getting your SD card out, putting a new one in. So I need to make a cutout for that. So I'm going to make a plane on the bottom of this here and offset it, of course, by 0 millimeters. Okay, and now I'm going to create a sketch on that plane, plane 4 that I just created. I'm going to hide the bottom so the Pi 2 is showing. And for this one, all I actually need to project is this line and this line. Okay, and now I can hide the Pi 2. Okay, and I use those lines so I can get a center point. So I'm going to draw a line. I press L, and I'm going to make sure construction is selected. So construction lines are just for doing things for reference. You don't need, they're not actually going to be used in the model. They're just used for reference. And I'm going to go to the center of both of these lines and then make a center point. So I'm going to cross them like that. Okay, and turn construction off. Now I'm going to press R to make a center rectangle and use this center point I just created. And it's kind of hard to actually get a center point, but just get it as close as you can. It doesn't really matter. And of course I'm going to make it, we'll try that. You really don't want to make it too big. You just want it to clear the enclosure so you can get at it. So I'm going to show the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to press D. Let's see, that's at 36. I'm going to try 35. We'll try something else. We'll just try 30. Okay, and over here, it's at 21. I'm going to try 15. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit more than 15. I'm going to try 18. Okay, so that looks good. So now what I can do is I'm going to select this, and I'm going to Shift E, of course, and bring it out this way in order to create cutouts for the SD card. And as far as how far I bring it in, it really doesn't matter too much. I just want to be able to make sure I have access to it. So I'm going to go ahead and show the Pi just so I can see kind of where I'm at, and I'm going to zoom in on it. Okay, so I'm thinking 3 millimeters. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, yeah, that'll give you good access to it. Okay, so now I'm going to, of course, go to the top, and I'll go ahead and show the top. And you can see the Raspberry Pi is in there. We have cutouts for all the USB ports and Ethernet port, the HDMI, audio, micro USB for power, the camera, and the SD card slot. So the last thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of a fillet to the top edges and the bottom edge, just to make it look better. So press Shift F. Of course, select all these edges. Okay, so 5mm is a little much. I'm gonna go with 2. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, and I'm gonna do the same thing to the bottom. Two millimeters. Okay, so now you have a nice case for a Raspberry Pi. Okay, the last thing you can do if you wanted to, and I may do this on my own, but I'm not going to do it on video because this is where you can start getting creative. You can put some designs on the top or anything, and I'm going to be making this public in Onshape. Actually, it already is public. I'm also going to upload the STLs to Thingiverse and put a link to the Onshape document in here. But the last thing I'm going to show you is, of course, just exporting it as STL to be 3D printed. So if I just go over here, I'm going to hide the Pi 2. So I have the top and the bottom. So the bottom, I'm going to press Export, STL, okay. And it's going to download, so there it is. I'm going to go ahead and show it in my folder. And yours is, of course, going to look different. But there's that one. I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to go into my 3D printing folder, and I'll create a new folder called, we'll call it Raspberry Pi 2 case, or enclosure. Okay, so it's Raspberry Pi 2 enclosure, and we're going to put it in there. And then, of course, if you go into Cura or whatever your preferred slicer is, I prefer Cura. But, you know, everyone has their own opinion. And if you guys want me to do a video about 3D printing and just kind of the process of slicing and all that, I'll go ahead and do that. So let me know in the comments if you want that. So I'm just going to open this up. Raspberry Pi 2 enclosure. And give it a minute to get on there. Okay, so there it is. There's our model that we created. And now I just have to go through all these settings, and most of the settings are probably going to be right. I've kind of fine-tuned my printer. I, of course, have a printer bought simple metal. And yeah, everything looks good. So I would do the same thing for the top part, and it would, of course, need to be oriented down to print right. But yeah, so thanks a lot for watching. Really enjoy making these videos. Let me know if you like them. Leave a like, subscribe, comment. So thanks a lot, and please subscribe.